Man.
Good evening, and welcome to the 6th season of the Prince Hall Think Tank, a monthly conversation amongst Prince Hall Freemasons where we discuss topics relative to craft masonry. My name is Brother Antonio Caffey, and I'm a very proud past master of St. Mark's Lodge number 7, located in Columbus, Ohio, where currently Worshipful Brother Vance Williams serves as Worshipful Master. My lodge was granted a charter in 1852 by the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Ohio, where currently the Honorable Chester C. Christie serves as Most Worshipful Grand Master. Before I let the other brothers introduce themselves, I would like to state that the views and opinions that are expressed by us this evening in no way reflect the views and opinions of the Grand Lodges and lodges in which we all hold membership in. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to just jot those down and let us know via our YouTube page. And if we have time at the end of the conversation this evening, we'll try to answer some of those for you. And don't forget, while you are on our YouTube page, to please subscribe so you can stay up to date with all things Think Tank. At this time, I'll let the brothers introduce themselves, starting with Brother Morgan.
Yes, good evening. And I'm so glad to be back here in the Prince Hall Think Tank. My name is James R. Morgan III. I'm a past master of Corinthian Lodge number 18, which operates under the auspices of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, with the Honorable Quincy G. Gant as our Most Worshipful Grand Master. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the Grand Historian for the District of Columbia, and I am very happy to be here. And as of 8 days ago, I celebrated a birthday, so I'm clearly in my 30s now. And I'm just so happy to be here. I can't believe, I think when we started this show, I think I was 24. So now I'm starting to get up there. I'm trying to catch up with y'all, but I don't know if I'm going to do that. I'm trying.
Happy birthday, your brother. Happy belated birthday. Brother Jack.
Good evening, all. Once again, Brother Damian Jack, proud past master of Paul Drayton Lodge number 7, where Brother Lonnie McBride serves as our worship master. Our lodge is under the auspices of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of North Carolina, where the Honorable Daniel L. D.T. Thompson serves as our 24th Most Worshipful Grand Master. It is an honor and pleasure to be with you here again for the 6th season. Looking forward to a great season and looking forward to kicking off this new season with a great night. So welcome back, and let's get it going.
Thank you, Brother Jack. Brother Gillarm.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brother Dave Gillarm. I serve as past master of Mount Pisgah Lodge, number 53, located in Columbus, Georgia, where Christopher Gainey serves as our worshipful master. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the grand historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, where the Honorable Corey Shackelford Sr. serves as our 18th Most Worshipful Grand Master. Definitely a pleasure. Definitely a pleasure to be here tonight. Looking forward to this new season. We got some great episodes lined up. So I guess we'll get into this one shortly.
Thank you, good brother. And our special guest this evening, Brother Evans, please introduce yourself to our audience. You're on mute, Brother Evans.
Good evening, brothers, the Prince Hall and Masonic family worldwide. It is indeed an honor having been invited to be a participant in the Prince Hall Think Tank. I'm the past master of the David A. McWilliams Research and Education Lodge, and currently serve as a special grand historian to the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, where Most Worshipful Quincy Gant serves as Grand Master.
Thank you, good brother. And thank you for joining us. We were excited when we were putting together looking at our 6th season. We were putting together our schedule of shows and panelists and guests that we wanted on this year. And, we looked at each other and we said, we need to get Brother Evans on. So, thank you for being with us. We wanted to really kick off our 6th season with a bang. So, we're looking forward definitely to your presentation. Tonight, we're starting our 6th season with a show entitled a deeper understanding of African spirituality and Freemasonry. Again, we're honored to have Brother Evans with us presenting on this topic. And without further ado, Brother Evans, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's see if I can make this work. I'm having some technical difficulties, but I'm sharing my screen. Come on, baby. All right. I think it's very important when we address any topic, like to ensure that we are talking about the same thing. So we're talking about African spirituality and Freemasonry. So I want to define African spirituality. African spirituality is holistic. In practice, African spirituality does not lend itself to exclusivity. African spirituality recognizes that all beliefs must encompass and incorporate each phase of life. African spiritual belief isn't separate from a person's culture, environment, or society. African spirituality isn't bound by a formal text, rather it is an oral tradition. What I would recommend to our Prince Hall Masonic family is one of our good brothers, Dr. Jeff Menzie, has a book out, Symbolically Speaking. And from the chapter 3, I've extracted this definition, his definition on African spirituality. Say, although there are hundreds of cultural and ethnic groups throughout the continent of Africa, there seems to be one underlying premise to all indigenous African philosophy, the element of spirituality. The ancient and indigenous African belief that God is all that has been created, because all that has been created is taken from the initially unformed aspect of God. In popular terms, this knowledge is summed up by the idea that God is omnipresent, meaning God is in all things and all places at all times. Hence, nothing is beyond God. In Freemasonry, the charge to the new apprentice after initiation enjoins us to contemplate the volume of sacred law, considering it is the unerring standard of truth and justice, and to regulate our life and actions by the divine precepts it contains. The FC is told that the working tools of the degree, namely the square, the level, and the plumb rule, are meant to teach us morality, equality, and justness and uprightness of life and action, so that by square conduct, level steps, and upright intentions, we may hope to ascend to those immortal mansions whence all goodness emanates. As a further guide, we are told to study the liberal arts, which tend so effectively to polish and adorn the minds, especially the science of geometry, which is established as the basis of our art. Oh Lord, let me get rid of that. It has been said, and this I downloaded from a website, and I apologize, I didn't paste the exact the URL on this page. But from one past master speculating on spiritual Freemasonry wrote this: it has been said that just as the speculative Freemasonry emerged from the operative Freemasonry, spiritual Freemasonry will emerge from the speculative. Freemasonry is a science of symbols in which, by their proper study, a search is instituted after truth, that truth consisting in the knowledge of the divine and human nature of God and the human soul. Now, that's a quote from Albert Mackey. Implied spirituality in Freemasonry. The rituals of Freemasonry are full of spiritual references, and Freemasons are compelled to reach out to God and to acquire self-knowledge and self-improvement. These can be termed spiritual quests, which adds a spiritual dimension to Freemasonry. This is from a site called theeducator.ca on geometry. And this is one of my favorite writers of English Freemasonry. This is William Preston's Illustrations of Masonry. Geometry, the first and noblest of science, is the basis on which the superstructure of Masonry is erected. By geometry, may we curiously trace nature through her various windings to the most concealed recesses. By it, we may discover the power, the wisdom, and the goodness of the grand artificer of the universe, and view with amazing delight the beautiful proportions which connect and grace this vast machine. By it, we may discover how the planets move in their different orbs and mathematically demonstrate their various revolutions. By it, we may rationally account for the return of the seasons and the mixed variety of scenes which they display to the discerning eye. Numberless worlds are around us, all framed by the same divine artist, which roll through the vast expanse and are conducted by the same unerring law of nature. Now, in Masonry, at the highest levels, we discuss what's called sacred geometry, not the geometry that we study in the 9th or 10th grade of high school, but geometry as taught in the ancient world, specifically the Nile Valley world. And the ancient geometry was a spiritual system, and it best manifests itself in what some Masons call Hermetic Masonry. And again, Hermetic Masonry, and I hate using that term because, again, as Europeans arose out of their dark ages and began to come in touch with documents from the ancient world, what they found were documents that the Greeks assigned to a character they call Hermes Trismegistus, where Hermes Trismegistus is a title, it never was a person. But the person whose works was taken was a brother who was called in his time, and please, this is not egotistical, but the brother was called Tehuti 3 times great. And they took the name Tehuti 3 times great and converted it to Hermes, the Greek god of wisdom, and made it Hermes Trismegistus, which means the same thing, 3 times great. So the ancient science of Egypt, as taught in Freemasonry, is taught under the banner of Hermetic Masonry. And in Hermetic Masonry, again, we come to what is known as sacred geometry. So in African spirituality, again, we're dealing with an omnipresent, omnipresent entity that is everywhere in all things throughout the universe. And as we address in Freemasonry our lessons, what we come to is implied spirituality, as opposed to having a specific subject in our teachings called spirituality. I'm ready to answer questions from you 4 brothers, if that was understood.
Well, thank you for that, Brother Evans. I guess my question would be, for those who don't know, I mean, obviously you and I know each other very well, but for those who do not know, what is your background in this work and on this topic that that basically qualified you to speak on it, and where did you study in your travels over the years? Can you give us some background on yourself?
Okay, well, I did my academic work at several universities. I started out at Howard University. I also studied at the University of Maryland and the University of the District of Columbia, and lastly at Brandeis University. My background is primarily in history. Before finishing my degree at Howard, I was drafted into the military and went off to a 12-year career in the Air Force. While in the Air Force, my first overseas assignment
was Tripoli, Libya in North Africa. And while there, I made my first trip to Egypt. When I walked into the museum in Cairo, the one thing that I said to myself was, I've been miseducated, because the first thing I saw was the bust of Amenhotep III, this big black bust that has the dreadlocks coming across his head, this big broad nose, and these thick lips. Being a lot older than most of you, one of the movies that I had seen before going overseas was called The Ten Commandments, in which the actors playing the role of Egyptians, for the most part, were not Black people. So learning that Black people, that the ancient Egyptians, the founders of the civilization along the Nile, were Black, made me decide when I came back to America and got out of the service that I would re-enter school, change my major from engineering to history. During the course of studying ancient history, what I call Northeast African history, my minor degree was in African American history, as such, in African American studies. Along the way, I met some giants. One of them was Dr. Ben. The other one was Dr. John Henry Clark. And they encouraged me as I went into business up on Georgia Avenue across from Howard University. We erected a store called the House of Kemet. And while there, we actually had community classes. You didn't have to be a university student to come hear the lectures and classes about our ancient history. And finally, in 1998, I made my second trip to the Nile Valley with Doc Ben. And on that trip, my eyes was open as they never had been before. In fact, I think the great thing about the second trip was that I had already had some academic preparation of ancient Egyptian history. So while on the trip with Doc Ben, we were able to discuss things in a much different perspective. Again, the author that I mentioned, Dr. Jeff Menzies, also is a good friend of mine, and the discussions we've had about African spirituality. He is well-versed. In fact, he has been initiated into several African spiritual systems. And the knowledge I've drawn from him, plus additional reading, kind of gives me a broader view of African spirituality from a perspective different than what is normally taught in the West. Here in the West, you know, we get negative, we have a negative concept of Vodou because of how it was used, particularly in the South during the period of slavery. And still to this date, people misunderstand, but you know, Vodou is called voodoo. And then all the negativity that's thought about voodoo for people who really don't understand what the spiritual system is about. So from the conversation with Dr. Jeff and having a broader understanding of a statement that he repeated to me that comes from Cheikh Anta Diop in a book that he wrote called The Cultural Unity of Africa. And that is that all the practices, though languages are different, though in many cases they use different symbols, the basic spiritual system is about 98% the same all over the continent. And it's having those discussions, again, my, you know, at 76 years old and a considerable amount of reading, it gives me comfort that I can speak about these topics. And of course, I am, how can I say this? I came into Freemasonry late. In fact, November the 13th of this year marks my 10th year in the craft. In fact, James has been in the craft longer than me. and he's a very young person. But I'm a prolific reader. I write. You know, I was the editor of the Masonic Digest here in DC for a while. I'm a member of the Phylaxis Society, where I've published several articles. And so that's an overview of my general background.
Brother Evans, I have a question. So
Yes,
given
sir.
everything, first of all, thank you for that great presentation. But it got me thinking, why should African spirituality be important to the Freemason?
Well, I would answer it this way. Spirituality should be important to everyone. But again, in our order, like I said, it's in an indirect way. In Freemasonry, there is a implied spirituality anyway, from our drama, from our lodge tools, especially the volume of sacred law, how we are encouraged, like to reflect in the outside world, the upright, conscious person. It's when you want to help your fellow man through charity and upliftment, those are in a way very distinct spiritual concepts. So like as Black men practicing the craft, I think having a different concept of our ancient culture, our past culture as Africans, all right. If again, men in my age group, in fact, when I was a young man, the worst thing you could have called me in the 1950s was an African or Black. We were in the process of arguing about trying to get the general public to capitalize the N in Negro. Our captivity and separation and miseducation during our sojourn away from our native home caused a lot of us to have very negative ideas about the continent and everything on the continent. And I think if we understand that, again, that's the way that Jeff put it, if you understand that divineness is in everything, from the smallest atom, the smallest particle, to the most complicated configuration of atoms, like from gold to silver to whatever the most sophisticated material object is. Everything, spirituality permeates everything, since it's a part of the divine who created everything. Spirituality is in everything. And if we start looking at that in that fashion, I think that'll broaden our horizons and make us more, give us a better functionality in our spiritual drive as Freemasons. I think it just broadens our horizon. And it's a thing that we shouldn't be ashamed of. In fact, reading earlier, I want to share this with Brother Morgan. While preparing for this, James, I ran across a audio presentation of John Dickey on his book that he published. This is a historian from England who came here to the United States last year. He interviewed Brother Morgan, Brother Roundtree, and myself about Prince Hall Freemasonry. But in his presentation, he talked about the Sikhs, the Hindus in India. And though they had different religions, the one place there was absolute unity were in the lodges in India. Because when the English expansion or colonized India, they took Freemasonry with them. And so in India, you have this mixture of religions, but yet in the lodge, these different men come together and practice the sacred order of the craft without any divisiveness or jealousy or any type of animosities toward each other, because they happen to practice different spiritual systems. The same is with us. And we have brothers who are in different denominations of Christianity. We have brothers who are Muslim. We have brothers who are Hebrew. And I imagine there might be some other religious practices. But when you get away from religion is the drama, like of a particular group. But the universal aspects of understanding that we all believe in and understand that there is a divine creator, God exists, and that we can come together on the square under the idea that we are worshiping God in full essence. Like it breaks down any animosity that people might have between different religious sects. So again, I think Freemasons can greatly benefit from understanding, again, African spirituality, because we have to pull the covers back off of all the negativity that was created by the Western world in terms of who we were and what we were. Again, remember the one church classified us as uncivilized. One of the greatest white historians of the late 19th century and early 20th century said that, as the Africans hadn't contributed anything to civilization. We were the only people on the earth who had not contributed anything to civilization. So to justify our captivity and our forced enslavement, all right, we were demeaned down to the least of peoples on the earth. And as we are regaining our spirituality, as we are regaining our consciousness of who we are, remember one of our great tenets is man know thyself. Well, if you know thyself, then you also and you know God, you're in a state of balance and harmony with being able to implement then what like the things that are symbolized by the working tools of our craft. Again, being on the square, like carrying ourselves, like on the plumb, and what have you. All of those things contribute to making a more holistic person and one without any inferiority complexes about who we are and what our line of descent is in the human story.
Brother Evans, you're gonna make me start passing around the collection plate in a minute because you're preaching tonight, brother. You're preaching tonight, brother. Some good stuff.
I hope to be dropping just a few seeds of that will raise questions in the mind of brothers that will encourage their further study. Because sometimes, for some of us, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus by naming anybody at any place, but for some, just the memorization of the ritual, attending the lodge meetings, making sure their dues are paid, and contributing to a charity or two, that's Freemasonry for them. See, and the craft is much more than that. It's a much broader concept than that. And the fact that, in fact, oftentimes when I speak, the difference between ancient masonry and Freemasonry. See, there's a big difference. In fact, Freemasonry is a 100% creation of Europeans. They in order to be legitimate and not be pursued by the church or the king as a threat, what the Reverend James Anderson did and what William Preston did was create an overlay of Judeo-Christianity over the craft as such. So within the structure of the craft as we know it as Freemasons, all right, there is Judaism and Christianity overlaying the craft. Now we're not a threat to the church, we're not a threat to the king. And further, I think he was the Duke of Chamberlain, was one of the first Grand Masters, and before him, Queen Victoria's son, Edward, was a Grand Master of the Lodge. So the Grand Master of Freemasons in England, by bringing royalty into positions of leadership, Freemasonry is no longer a threat to the government. By overlaying the craft, instead of using the pure ancient ideas with Christianity and Judaism, it's not a threat to the Church of England. It was still a threat to the Catholic Church, but for different reasons. Because here again, the Catholic Church, you have to be, and I'm not demeaning a religion, but the policies from about 800 AD up to around the middle of the 16th century, the Catholic Church was all supreme. The Holy Roman Empire was established by William the Conqueror, I believe, or Charlemagne, and the church had 100% exclusivity over deciding who was royal and who wasn't, as such. So free thinking wasn't tolerated. This is why the gentlemen of Europe sought to go study this mathematics and geometry that was being taught in the operative Masonic, or the operative Masonic guilds. That is, the brothers who were building the cathedrals, who were building the castles during the Dark Ages as such. They had a craft, but they taught mathematics, they taught physical geometry, they taught astronomy, and all of those subjects were heretical in terms of the church. And as I'm sure most of you know, there was a guy named Galileo who asserted that the church's idea that the earth was the center of the universe and the sun and everything went around it, he challenged it and said, no, the earth is going around the sun. He was put under house arrest and not allowed to leave his house or go out and spread that doctrine. Later, there was another well-known European, his name was Copernicus, and they did the same thing to him. So I'm not talking about astrology, astronomy, the movement of the bodies in the heavens, was not allowed to be taught to the average person. The church outlawed it. It was considered heretical. So free thinkers, as they began to meet in secret with these guilds of builders, they learned these arts that was taught in those operative classes. And eventually, from, again, somewhere in the Middle Ages up to about, the 1600s, I think it was King James VI of Scotland, legitimized Scottish Masonry. And later, by 1717, as you know, they finally had the strength and wherewithal, once Anderson wrote his constitutions, and that the state could see that in the Masonic constitutions, there's no threat to the state. And again, in the constitutions, it's no threat to the Church of England as such. And after that, these, the gentlemen of England, and they were increasing in number because of English colonialism and the fact that the merchants, lawyers, the whole class of what I would call upper middle class men who had monies they didn't have titles. They weren't gentlemen they weren't barons and dukes and all of the titles in Europe. So the craft in 1717 gave an outlet for men of monies and to have social status within the craft. And it was allowed to develop. And soon after, the Grand Lodge of England was created in 1717. Within 60 years, it had spread to a degree here to the American colonies, where our founder, Prince Hall, and his band of brothers were able to form African Lodge #1, as such, which leads us to where we are today. James?
Yeah, brother Evans, thank you for that. I was just gonna say, when you mentioned earlier, Professor John Dickey, he wrote the book, I believe it's called The Craft, which recently came out.
Yeah.
And I was honored. A lot of folks have been inboxing me lately because there's a photo of my hand in there. So y'all can pay I think $15-20 to see a picture of my hand in that particular work. But thank you so much for summing that up. I think that as we move forward through the conversation, I want to let you know that a lot of folks are in the chat. They have a lot of questions for you, so we want to make sure we can get to those. But thank you so much for that, because I think it's important, that we as Prince Hall Masons and Eastern Stars and all that good stuff, that we properly understand where we are, in time and space, in relationship to each other, to this organization, and to the other institutions that you named. I think that's very important. I think Brother Jack or Brother Caffey had a question for you.
What I love about Brother Evans is when you gave the quote, and if you don't mind, I'm going to have to use that in future conversations. Religion is the drama of a particular group, and that makes so much sense when you talk about the difference between religion and spirituality. So in understanding that and trying to hopefully to get others to that level of enlightenment and understanding the difference between them, my quick question to you is what are some of the obstacles that you have faced, and when you talk about wanting to plant the seeds for those to get to that understanding, what are some of the obstacles that you have faced in teaching spirituality, and then in particular African spirituality?
Okay. Well, oddly enough, the biggest obstacle that I've run into comes from what I'll call brothers and some sisters who I think have goodness in their heart. I mean, they are honest. I'm not going to demean them in any way. But when you are socialized to say that what you believe is more important than what you know, you're like, and see, like, so religion is based on beliefs. The craft is based on knowledge. Remember, I mean, when we go through the college degree that is taught in the second degree, what's called the liberal arts. I mean, you can get an advanced degree in almost every topic of the so-called 7 liberal arts. But the biggest obstacle for people wanting to go beyond what their religious doctrine is that if it's not in the Bible, I don't want to know nothing about it, and it sounds like something devilish to me. You like, some folks take 100% of their spiritual teachings just from the KJV, the King James Version, and any and everything else is an obstacle. And in fact, one of my mentors here in Washington D.C., Felix Lodge #3, the brother now turned 92 years old. James, I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but this brother used to come down to the library all the time and say, y'all don't need all these books and stuff in here. All you need is the Bible. Christianity, the Bible and Freemasonry is one and the same thing. And some people have that mindset, like, and you tolerate your, I hate to say this at 76, but you tolerate your elders. You don't throw them under the bus, as it were. But I think in the modern age, in fact, one of the things John Dickey said today is that he noticed as on his travels while writing the book, is that English Masonry and American Masonry are graying like my hair. And his biggest question is the future. Are the old gray-haired men going to be able to bring enough young people in to keep the crafts going? And if so, are they going to use the same processes that they have up to this point? And as Prince Hall Masons, like I'll say the same thing. The future of the craft, we don't have the interest in the community that we used to have. When I was a little kid, there was a term that was used in my community all the time. See that guy over there? He's a big time Mason. That's a status thing in the Black community, but people knew that you were a Mason, a big time Mason, especially if you had gone beyond the Blue House and perhaps was in the Scottish. All they knew about the Blue House in the Scottish Rite. So if you were a 32nd or a 33rd degree, that's a real big time Mason. But today we don't have that same awe in our community for men of the craft. And so as we reach out, we're not supposed to recruit and what have you, but the lodges are dwindling in membership. And I've heard from at least 5 brothers from 4 different lodges during this pandemic that staying home and interacting via Zoom and what have you, it's going to be difficult for them to want to get up and come back down to the temple. So if they don't want to do that, I mean, we're going to have to be creative, as we attract younger people and, to keep the craft going and extend it into the future. For us, I'm so happy about, I see light in terms of the Phylaxis chapter that opened in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's the first chapter, I think, with an Egyptian name. And as we go back and understand that what the Europeans who created European Freemasonry are studying is the science of ancient Egypt. As such, like science created by, like ancient Black cultures. And I think that as we grow more and make that the point of a point in our knowledge, as we spread it in our proceedings, I think we'll create more interest. Like this generation, it's like I'm so proud of them out in the street in the Black Lives Matter movement and the objection to all the killings of these, Black men and women, unarmed and in all kind of ways by the state. That it's an awakening taking place in the youth. They didn't wait for the old people to get out front. They went out on their own with their own ideas, and they are making people listen. And I think the same kind of thing to get into that energy. I think that one of the things that we should be doing in the craft as Prince Hall Masons is emphasizing the real ancient origin of the craft of masonry, or geometry with the big G, as Preston points out in his illustrations of masonry. And so does James Anderson in his constitutions. When he lays out the history, what I disagree with, and I understand why he did it with James Anderson, though, he takes it beyond the Nile Valley to go all the way back to Noah. Like Noah was, he made Noah a mason and building the ark. But I think the organized teaching of the mysteries, we all know, took place in the Nile Valley long before, like the people in that part of in the so-called Middle Eastern part of the world came into existence as full nations. But the real source of sacred geometry and mathematical geometry comes from the African cultures of the Nile Valley. And that in the Nile Valley runs not just in present day geographical Egypt, but all the way down to the foothills of the Mountain of the Moon, as they say in their own text, where the god Hapi dwells. So that's all the way down to from Uganda to the Mediterranean. All of those peoples contributed in one way or the other to the overall development of that whole 2,000-mile trek of the river running from the middle of Africa north to the Mediterranean Sea. And the what was it? John Henry Clark termed the Egypt's last kick in the sun was when Pianke Shabaka and the 26th dynasty came back up from Kush one more time to reestablish the deep African connection and creation and to bring order back to the Nile Valley civilization. But that last walk in the sun that they made was short-lived because of the growth and expansion of Persia, and later the 5 Hellenic states that were unified by Alexander of Macedonia. I hate using that, calling him Alexander the G. But once he unified those 5 city-states into a nation state, then he was able to go off with the army and eventually sent one of his 5 generals came into the Nile Valley and established the Greek control of the country. And that's Ptolemy I. And from Ptolemy all the way up to the invasion of the Romans, once they just got rid of Cleopatra, the knowledge shifted from being ours. These people coming in, learning what was already written on those papyruses and studying in Alexandria, and it led to the great, what's called the Golden Age of Greece. The other thing is, after the Arabic invasion of Egypt, around 800, what they were able to pull out, what was left in the Nile Valley, the bits and pieces of the documents that were found, they went back and built a brand new city, Baghdad, and which led to the golden age of Islam. All the scientific treatises and the discoveries and inventions that they had. So our knowledge was being pulled out, taken, and creating great societies, both in Greece and in what today is Iraq and stuff. But I think we need to teach who the ancient teachers were, what the ancient doctrine was, and what of that ancient doctrine was borrowed and brought to Europe and is the basis of English Freemasonry.
Brother Evans, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So a few years ago, shout out to Brother Darrell Hodge. He's a grand historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Oklahoma. Yeah, he found a text, and it was from African Lodge. I believe they were having a table lodge around 1788 where they were speaking in Mandingo.
Yes.
Yeah. So in today's time, how can the brother that's looking to make some type of connection to Africa introduce African spirituality or something from our native land into the lodge? So how would he go about doing that?
Go back and reread John Merritt's sermon to the lodge. Go back and reread, I think it was the 1797 speech of Prince Hall to the lodge. And I think what you'll find that as early as those two speeches, that Prince Hall was already laying down an African genealogy for Freemasonry in his own way. The thing that amazed me is the assumption that the captivity alone erased our minds. And yet, as early as 1780, like 97, and I forgot the year of John Merritt's speech, but the brothers were quite aware of their Africanness. Like it wasn't African Lodge by accident. Then I'll say this, and I'm probably a minority of one. There might be one or two other people around, but I think the biggest mistake that they made was in honoring Prince Hall was changing the name of the lodge. It should have been African Lodge number 1. It should still be African Lodge number 1, or 459 if you want to take the English numbering system. And but Prince Hall Freemasonry is African Freemasonry, and we have to get out. I mean, we know that the brothers were able still to communicate. I mean, being captive and being held on somebody's plantation or a small little farm for a few years did not erase their language or their knowledge of who they were, where they were from. And the thing, we talk about the Tyler outside the door to make sure nobody can come in and eavesdrop on us. When those brothers, they didn't need a Tyler, they could speak Mandingo. And let's see, I know that was one case, the case of the brothers who were kidnapped and taken to the islands. And one of them was from African Lodge. And when he told the guy that was trying to buy him who he was and gave him a couple of signs, and then the guy heard the whole story, they got word back to Boston. Prince Hall wrote a letter. And those, what was it, James? 3 of them? There were a number of them that were captured and and was getting ready to be resold. These are free blacks, free African men now, who were kidnapped out of Boston, taken to the islands, were going to be resold into captivity. And because they were in the lodge and in the craft, and they knew their grips and their signs, they convinced this white boy to go tell, to get word back to Boston. And they ended up, the letter was written and they ended up getting free. So we are the ones in the modern day, who have been socialized away from knowing our real heritage. And the more we make contact with our true selves, again, know thyself, we're African people. And the more we're, and I don't put a lot of emphasis on the hyphen and the word they put behind it. I'm not that proud of the American part of my, well, I can't say that anymore, but most of the American part of my experience. And as I shared with James just a couple of days ago, I got an inquiry from a brother on Ancestry.com who we are genetically linked by DNA test. I did the blood test, and my lineage in Virginia goes back to a group of Native American and Blacks that fought in the Revolutionary War and went back and settled in Amherst County, Virginia. And as I was sharing with James, I'm Tehuti never true. I've already recreated a personages out of my African self. And now I find out that I actually have some indigenous native self in me too. So I need to go back and re-examine that. But that's not the American part. That's the native part of my being.
Very cool, Brother Evans. Very cool. We're gonna go over to viewer comments, and they are in there flying. We got a lot of folks from all over the country. We want to thank all of our guests, as we do every month, for tuning in for each episode. Because without you all, this program could not be possible. We have a question here from Mr. Alex Fitzgerald. He wants to know. He says, "Is African spirituality saying God is reality, understood and seen with science? Also, is the Spirit of God learning?"
Is the Spirit of God learned?
Learning. Is the Spirit of God learning?
I wouldn't. I don't think I would use that characterization. But yes. Again, God is in everything. There's no thing that exists in the universe that God is not in. Remember, however you know the story of the beginning, there was nothingness, or there was just the great black, the primordial noon. And in fact, as Jake Carruthers in his book, The Metu Neter, states, by the divine word, the universe came into existence. See, so the universe was spoken into existence by a tune in one of the dramas, or from Amen, the great unseen force, created objective reality. And the structure of that objective reality, in order to make the material world, the basic principles is based upon the concept of the duality of opposites. All right. For every proton, there's an electron in every atom. And even as Dr. Jeff points out, the subatomic particles that make up the atoms, the electrons and the protons. All right, there's a balance of duality of opposites that creates the material world. So in everything. And the unfortunate, but not unfortunate, but the thing that we don't like to address, even when we're dealing with spirituality, we're talking about all of the positive aspects of it. But if the principles of a duality of opposites is true, and we accept that as correct, guess what that says about spirituality? That there's a negative side, there's a negative spirituality also. Everything is not positive. But we, unlike everything else in the universe, have the sole ability, because we have mind, all right, to study and choose what forces are going to influence us. Again, going back to some of my teachings, I'm sure all of you have heard of the principle called mind over matter. In fact, I like the way Dr. Jeff puts it, mind on the matter, but mind over matter. But in the African concept, it's spirit over mind, mind over matter. The spirit with which guides your thinking, your use of the information that's coming into your temple, decides what you do. If you have, if you are consciously subordinate yourself to the divine principles of the universe, to God itself, then if that's what's guiding you, hey, everything that you're going to do in life, all right, will be done from good principles, because there's a good spiritual aspect that's guiding you. But then by the same token, some people have, and you've heard this, some people have the devil in them. Some people are guided by negative energy. And no matter what, they're guided by this negative spiritual reality. As children, we're sometimes told there's a good angel on your right shoulder and a bad angel on your left shoulder. Both of them competing, whispering in your ear, trying to get you to make your decisions based on what these spiritual forces are telling you. But what the in spirituality, just understand that everything spiritual is not positive.
Thank you for that. We had a question that came in, which I thought was a very good one, and I'm trying to see who posted it. But the question was, and I apologize to the person who submitted it. But the question was, do you feel that the writings of Albert Churchward have any value in regards to Kemetic or Egyptian history? And that comes from Magus 1346.
Yeah, Albert Churchward is one of my favorite authors. I think he was very insightful for during the age that he wrote. I can say he's one of the Masons of Europe that I think contributed a lot of very good knowledge for Masons to study. I love Albert Churchward. Yeah, in fact, I'm looking around here in my library. I have several of his books.
Awesome. Actually, as a side note, one of the first books I got that had anything to do with Freemasonry was his Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man. I have the edition where
John Henry Clark wrote the introduction.
The introduction. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. We got some. The questions are flying through here. We had somebody was asking. Let me see. How should we instill and encourage African-centered or Afrocentric Freemasonry in older brothers, or do we need to move without them? And that comes from Christopher Leonard.
I don't want to leave anybody behind. I continually search for a way to reach older brothers and let them know. I try to explain to them, for example, when I explained Hermetic Masonry and who Hermes was, and then, like I say, see the 7 liberal arts actually comes from this Hermetic doctrine. Now let's look at who Hermes was. So you have to lead them to it. It's difficult in some cases because, again, if for 70 years of your life, Jesus has been the center of your socializing, or your learning process, it's difficult to get some brothers to want to open up and learn additional things and stuff. And unfortunately, like I said, I know men my age and older who are still victims of the process of the 50s and the 60s, and don't want to look at anything like African centered. Academically, I use the term looking at the world, from the standpoint of being an African and looking at the world as that is my centerpiece, looking out at the rest of it. Some of us only know how to look at the world through the European paradigm, and they must be re-educated. I mean, even in terminology, for the sake of the discussion, you notice I didn't use the word Kemet tonight. I stuck with the term Egypt. But here's a people who had a civilization, at least at the shortest time zone they want to give us, at least 3,000 years before the Greeks showed up. All right. But once the Greeks show up, they no longer call us by our names. They called us by a term they created. Or when the Greeks first saw Black people. Yeah, a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what the word Ethiopic means or where it came from, Ethiopia. Ethiopia meant burnt skinned people or Black people. It was a general description. It wasn't a nation. In fact, the country we know today is Ethiopia. Name was Abyssinia up until the early part of the last century. They just changed their name to Ethiopia, but the country was Abyssinia. Ethiopia is a description. So when Ethiopia stretched forth her hand unto God, or Egypt stretched forth her hand unto God, it was Kemet. In Abyssinia, and the names that from our culture that we should call things. But again, we've been so socially engineered that even when we describe the world, we only describe it from terminology, which comes out of the European paradigm. So once they named it, that's what it is. I mean, we had a hard time dealing with the word Negro. Negro was a description. There wasn't a country called Negro. Right. You know, like Negro, that was a description of how we look, you know, like about our color. It had nothing to do with a nation that we came from. But once they put something in place, it's very difficult to overcome that.
Right. Thank you so much. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, Brother Caffey. Sound good? All right. So we're gonna take 2 more. And I do apologize to everybody because we got a lot of great questions coming in. So we're gonna go to my friend Trey the third, or Trey 3 times great, because I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna be James 3 times great now. Y'all gonna have to start. Yeah, there we go. Trey 3 times great is asking, how do the ancient Kemetic mysteries and practices tie into our Masonic rituals of today?
Okay, well, in the second degree, when you are given the curriculum, the study, the 7 liberal arts, that comes straight out of the ancient Nile Valley mystery system, as it were. What I would often tell people, and if I pull back away from it, but one of my favorite books was called Stolen Legacy. But we call him George G.M. James now. But back when I was in school, in fact, John Henry Clark called him George Grandmaster James. But he was one of the earliest writers to try to make clear that every principle that is attributed to a Greek philosopher was taught in the Nile Valley system at least 1,000 years before these people were born, as such. So when we talk about mathematics, grammar, you have to learn how to speak. In fact, again, I borrowed from another book I would suggest if you can get it. I know it's hard to get today. It's called The Medu Netta by Jacob Carruthers. Dr. Carruthers out of Chicago. Good speech, Medu Netta, and I mean, divine speech is Medu Netta, and good speech is Medu Nefer, as such. Language is so important. It is so, you know, like when signals go into our brains, what comes out, what we are trying to describe, it is very important to be precise and correct in what we say and how we say it. So grammar, arithmetic. You can't study advanced mathematics if you don't know arithmetic. You can't study rhetoric if you don't know grammar. You know, so there's a sequence in learning the 7 arts. You know, like, and I don't have them listed right in front of me right now, but the 7 liberal arts are from the ancient Egyptian mystery systems. And how you study them today, I mean, if you study them today, you are studying an ancient, you know, like Nile Valley or Kemetic doctrine. So even if you don't have to go back to college, you don't have to go anywhere. With this, with the internet, Google either one of these terms, look at the origin, and you can, if you really are advancing yourself and making yourself wiser, you know, like, again, one of our objects is to gain in knowledge, the knowledge of God. Not that you only believe there's a God, but to know there's a God. And that puts you in a different space. See, when you say I believe something, you are also saying there's a possibility it might not be true. You're not 100% certain about it. Knowledge trumps beliefs. Knowledge has always trumped beliefs. If you don't believe me, when you were 5 years old, you believed in Santa Claus. You know, like when you were 6, you believed in the Easter Bunny. Anything, you know how people get you? You know how you fool a kid? You promise a kid something sweet. And a kid will pretend that whatever you want him to do, he's going to do it with all his heart and soul. You're like, so you're like based on beliefs. So knowledge is the trump word in studying the 7 liberal arts, which comes out of the Nile Valley.
But Dave Gillarm told me that Damien Jack was really Santa Claus.
Well, Well, I tell you what.
Plus, Dave believes that the New York Knicks will one day win the championship too.
This is true.
That is knowledge.
Oh, man. I'm going to join Charles Barkley on that one.
No guarantees here.
Good stuff.
Yeah, see, and it's, but again, like knowledge that a child is able to obtain as they get older, you increase, hey, you get away from some of the stuff you give them and give them real stuff. It's like the difference between eating pablum, and eating a steak. As such, like babies, you can't feed them a full, full food. You have to mash it up and make it soft so they can take it in their mouths and take it down. I mean, the whole idea of what we do to children with fairy tales and that kind of, there are some great principles in Alice in Wonderland. Like in fact, somebody tried to make it a Masonic story about Alice in Wonderland. I don't buy that. But in a lot of the fairy tales, it's a symbolic story conveying different kind of truths to children. But it's written at a level and told at a level that a child can understand. And as you get older, you can, you change the structure of how you teach them these principles as such. So again, awesome. Knowledge always trumps beliefs. And before you cut me off, James, I know time is running out. I want to say this to all four of you gentlemen. I am so proud of you in having grabbed the bull by the horns and advanced this technology and spreading, and teaching and allowing us to have conversations and spread knowledge about the craft and how we do things. We have to be in the 21st century. We have to use the tools that are available. And you all was you say this is year 6? 6 years ago, I don't think there were many brothers using, like YouTube or anything else, really. I mean, there might have been a lecture or two or somebody might have put up, but to have a structured program with what I call deep thought, not just thinking, but deep thought, because everything Masonic, you have to go beyond the surface and think deeply about it. And the foundation that you all have laid for the craft, especially for Prince Hall Freemasonry. I am so proud of you young men. And, if I could be around another 25 years, I would be a regular attendee. But again, I know I'm in the winter of my life, and I'm looking back at things that are going on and looking at the future. And I'm proud that, believe it or not, there will be some others that'll pop up within the next couple of years, because I know how we do, and somebody's not going to like specifically the way you all are doing it. And there'll be another Zoom or internet, kind of presence where people can teach and learn lessons. So congratulations for being out front with this. And whatever you do, don't let the naysayers discourage you. Grow and get better.
We appreciate that, Brother Evans, especially coming from you. We appreciate that a lot.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. We had one last question, but I'll say this in response to that as well. A lot of folks don't know that I'll share with you all very quickly an anecdote of how myself and Brother Evans met. We met, I think I was, this is before either one of us was in Freemasonry. In fact, it must have been my sophomore, junior year when I was at Howard University. I was walking across campus, and I happened to see this gentleman, and he was lost. And I don't know I forget where he was trying to go, but he was trying to find an event or something was going on. And, in my mind, I said, oh, who's this older gentleman? And he just approached me and asked me if I could help him find his way to wherever it was he was going, which I did. And in doing so, we had a nice little short discussion, and I was very impressed with him. And, and I said, oh, okay, cool. Flash forward a few months when I'm joining Freemasonry, and, we bumped into each other again during that time period. I was raised before him. I got raised in July of 2010. He got raised November 20 of 2010. But we've been running buddies ever since, and he's been like a father to me and everything else. And I want to say here publicly that I love you, sir, and thank you so much for taking the time this evening to be with us. And you're actually, I think you're one of the few people who's been a repeat guest on our show. Actually, we've had a lot of one and dones, but you this is your second time around. So
by the way, I was looking for Dr. Carr's office.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was Dr. Carr's office. Yes, sir. Absolutely. That's exactly right. So we had one more question that came from somebody who I think has one of the best names of our guest viewers tonight, and we want to thank our viewers again. But my favorite viewer tonight is Mr. James. There may be a little bias in that, but Mr. James wants to know, Brother Evans, can you please recommend 2 books, because he doesn't want belief, he wants some knowledge. So can you please give Mr. James and our rest of our viewers 2 books that they can go out and purchase or what have you, where they can go get some more of this knowledge that you've been dropping on us this evening?
Wow. Okay. Well, one is called Symbolically Speaking, African Lodge #1 by Dr. Jeff Menzie. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. I won't go there, but that would be one to really get it, and chapter 3 go into depth about African spiritual systems and how it relates to the craft. Now, the second book is going to surprise you, but believe it or not, it's one that amazed me so many years ago. And every time I pull it out, go through one of the chapters, I learned something new. And it's The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And in it, you get a cross section of a lot of the ancient concepts that were practiced in different cultures. And in closing, I'll say another one that might help. I don't want to get you confused by it, but it'll give you a foundation for understanding something about how knowledge travels through time. There's a book called The 16 Crucified Saviors. And what's important to understand, there was in ancient Nile Valley, when by the 600 BC time zone, they were letting more and more foreign students come in and teaching them in the mystery systems. And the graduates were told this: there's only one divine truth that you have learned here. Your job is to go back and translate this one divine truth into your language and symbols of your culture so that your people will understand it. Even to this, there's only one divine truth. All right. It has many faces, but it's a variation of the same thing. And that's how the ancient world got to the point where, Horus, Heru of the ancient Egyptian system, was a crucified savior. So from Horus to Jesus the Christ, there are 16. And once you understand that, and again, I'm not belittling anybody's religious beliefs or faith system, but understanding the ancient world, that oftentimes the one truth will have many appearances, but it's only one.
Thank you, good brother. So as we I was about to, when you had said that, I was about to ask a follow-up question, but I can guarantee you that would have probably kept us on for another hour. So I wrote it down, because when we have you on again, so you can be our first 3-time guest, I'll make sure I'll lead with that one. But thank you.
You mean 3 times great?
All right, there you go. There you go.
Oh,
keep it with the theme. So as we often do, we want to do our closing thoughts this evening. And we, Brother Evans, we can start out with you. Any closing thoughts that you have for us this evening?
Well, again, I want to thank you, brothers, and on the one hand for inviting me to share a little bit of knowledge that I have. And again, I don't want to, blow your whistle too loudly, but I think what you all are doing are very important. It's very important for the growth of the craft. It's very important for the continued expansion of knowledge of the brothers in the craft. So again, thank you. African spirituality, I'll close by saying this: it's nothing to be afraid of. It has nothing to do with devil worship or any of that other nonsense that people will put into your minds. You know what is funny? is that the Pope from sometime around 1500 up through the middle 1700s, the Catholic Church's official policy was that Freemasonry was devil worship and sorcery. And here we are, and we know that's not true. So people say things, like in order, like for ulterior motives. So African spirituality has a rich history. It's effective, and for every Prince Hall Mason, it's well worth your time and energy to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Evans. Brother Morgan, closing thoughts.
Brother Evans, again, thank you so much, not only for being here tonight, but for the great wealth of knowing the great wealth that knowing you has brought to my life these past really over 10 years, really. I really appreciate that. To our viewers, once again, I want to thank you all. Especially I want to thank everybody for the many birthday messages that I received last week. And even going back before that a little bit, over the summer, I lost my great grandfather, who was also a member of the craft in the state of Alabama. And I would be remiss if I did not thank each of you all on the show here, as well as many of our viewers, for your condolences on that. But other than that, I'm just thankful. We leave politics and stuff at the door, so I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but I do hope everybody gets out and votes as we get closer to November's election, and make sure you're registered. And if you are, make sure that you get with some of the older folks and some of the younger folks in your family. Make sure that you're registering to vote, and vote your conscience. I can't and won't tell you who to vote for, but I sincerely hope that everybody is getting prepped to practice and exercise your civic duty. So with that being said, thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Brother Jack.
Absolutely. Once again, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be on the show, Brother Evans. You took it out the park this evening. I definitely want to thank you personally. I know it has been an incredible journey since I have met you to glean from your field. As I said, there's a couple of things that I take away from the night. As you said, religion is the drama of a particular group, and also the difference between believing and knowing. Belief, basically the belief is what you've been told, and knowing is what you discover for yourself. And that's what I take from this evening. So thank you so much to the viewers. Thank you for your continued support. Piggybacking off of what Brother Morgan said, please get out and vote, no matter how you vote. I do hope that everyone took a page of what has been happening in previous elections when you choose to be silent. At the end of the day, whether you realize it or not, your silence does become your vote. So we need to have our voices heard. So please get out there and vote. And for those who can't, do your best to help them get there, because our voices do need to be heard. Until next month, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks. And Brother Gillarm.
This was definitely awesome, and thank you, Brother Evans, for you bring it every time. So I guess this is the level we expect from you now. From now on, got to bring the heat. Yeah, this has been an awesome show. I learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of viewers, they picked up something. They also picked up some tools to help further their Masonic education. And that's always a great thing. I think that was our goal from the beginning, to give people a little ammo to go ahead and bring that information back to their lodges. So with that said, I'm just looking forward to this next season. I'm looking forward to when the NBA the season been over for me. So when the NBA,
but guess who's going to the finals?
So when the real NBA season starts again, all I ask y'all continue to cheer for the Knicks. We're gonna win a championship next year. So I guess I'll be seeing you all on the next episode.
Thank you, Brother Gillar. Thanks, brothers. And again, thank you, Brother Evans, for joining us this evening. I had this little piece that I was thinking about, as far as my closing thoughts in regards to the subject. And one of the things that popped in my head initially was the whole, I know since I've been in the craft, we often, be it on a lot of forums, in person or whatever, we often heard that debate on, or brothers would debate on the real origins of Freemasonry. Did it originate in England, or is there, did it originate in Kemet? It have some other further meaning. And I thought about it, and I think having that debate, it really we focused a lot of energy on that, and we missed out on really studying the spirituality aspect of the craft and its connection with ancient Egypt. We didn't have to discuss the whole, okay, who did what first. Just appreciate the lessons that and the antiquity of those lessons. Spirituality for me, and especially with Freemasonry, with this, I've always viewed it as a personal thing. Like, we all, we're historians, we've researched, we find those little nuggets of information, and we do shows on them, write books about it. And we do all of that for the audience. But for me personally, when I study Freemasonry to actually improve myself, I always saw that as a very private thing. It's not that I don't want to share it with everyone, but it's really, it's the science itself. And studying myself and how I can improve myself to be a better person. So a lot of the themes that you hit on tonight for me were very personal, because it's about growth, and I would urge every brother, and if you're not experiencing that right now, don't worry. I've been in the craft for over 25 years, and I can honestly say I did not really start studying Freemasonry from that aspect until I was well within probably my 12th year in the craft. When I said, when I really was looking for something to improve myself, and it was like, hey, stupid, you have something right here. go back and look at it. You have all of this stuff, and then tie it in with all of these other, belief systems and different things like that. So it'll eventually come, but just know that the wealth of knowledge can open you up to, some real great self-discovery. So thank you, Brother Evans, again for your presentation. Lastly, too, I just want to thank Brother Morgan, Brother Jack, Brother Gillarm, all of our former panelists and our great guests, but more importantly, our terrific viewers as we start this 6th season. Again, I just keep telling that quick story. When we first started the Prince Hall Think Tank, it was supposed to be just a one and done. We just wanted to highlight, we started in September to highlight, the granting of the charter to African Lodge. Next thing I know, we're 6 seasons deep, and really we hopefully we've made some type of small impact on Freemasonry and Prince Hall Freemasonry in particular. So thank you all for that. Thanks for joining us tonight. As all of the brothers have already pointed out, if you haven't already done so, please register to vote. Please keep up to date with your individual states, the important dates within your state in regards to voting, absentee voting, voting in person, all of that. Keep up to date with that, because and exercise that civic duty, as Brother Morgan said. Have a good evening, and remember, let's teach Masonry in our lodges. Good night.